Obviously, we're here chatting about Abraham Boys. I think there's been countless interpretations of Abraham Van Helsing over the years. What was it about this version that interested you and made you want to play him?
Well, I think there's because there are not the things that we typically see in these films. You didn't have him battling vampires, and he's not running around with a bag of steaks and holy water and strands of garlics. I think it's a much more reserved take on this character. Um, but there's an underlying um, intensity about the character because we all know his backstory. We know the things that he's done, but this finds him in a place many years later, um, and I feel like this film is less of a horror film and more of an art film. It's visually it you you have this setting, which is bucolic, beautiful, sort of, Victorian house with the 360-degree view of rolling hills. And it's visually very beautiful. And yet the house is a character like Abraham, and that's supposed to be the safe place. And yet that's where this malevolence is. But this version of Van Helsing is as the audience, you're not sure. In the same way in Roman Polanski's The Tenant, you're not sure because the audience, it's all experienced also through the boy's eyes. So they're living it there. But is he is that which we see and which he's talking about, is it true because he has credibility with the audience, with them knowing who he is? Or is this a man's descent into madness and kind of paranoia? So, um, there a very conscious effort on my part, performance wise, to keep this character not neutral and not sedentary, but very still and very kind of matter of fact. And I think that juxtaposed to what's going on and what we're experiencing visually, which Natasha did beautifully, was there are a lot of moments rather than the sort of tropey jump scares. There are visually just little glints of things where you go, "Oh, what was that? Did I just see what I thought? Did I see that, or was that?" Or am I seeing this right now? What is that? What's that shape? What's that form? What is that movement? And I think it's a very unnerving film versus everything being very much at the forefront of be scared here, jump here. It's a much more subtle version, and it takes its time, and it allows us to see Van Helsing, his relationship to his sons and to his wife. But there's a real underlying siege mentality, which I think sort of harkens back to the old westerns of sort of circling the wagons as the Indian bands are coming. Well, what is this that's coming? And he tells you what he believes is coming and is here. So I just think it leans more into it's a thinking person's film.
Yeah, for sure. It's got this lovely creepy there to it. And you watch podcast and not ask you a little bit about, your time on the show. Obviously, you played the man in black, who, although only in a couple of episodes, was such a pivotal character in the mythos of Lost. What was it like stepping into his cloak?
Well, I think you know in terms of Van Helsing, you can't be when this character has been played before and by some amazing actors. You have to. It's a responsibility to take that character and try to kind of make it your own. And also because of Joe Hill and Natasha, this is a different version of Van Helsing. But in the same way, doing the Man in Black. Um, that experience was very different for me because Lost, massive NDA, paperwork and everything. I had to be very, very careful. I didn't even know ultimately who I was. I signed on blindly because the writer Elizabeth Sarnoff was a colleague of mine that I had worked with on Deadwood and other shows before, and she just said, she called me up directly and said, I can't tell you anything about it, but all I can tell you is it's going to be worth your while. And I said, okay, I'm in. So the first thing I ever did was that scene on the beach with Jacob. And I had been watching the show and knew, but I didn't know who I was. And so when we finally got to that Darth Vader, Luke, I am your father moment where with Nestor Carbonell in the jungle and he says, I'm the black smoke. We had everybody got quiet in the crew. I remember shooting that as we were just running through it for a camera rehearsal. And I sort of looked around like, why is everybody being so funny about this? And Nestor said, dude, you realize what you just said? And I said, yeah, I'm the black smoke. And he went, yeah, that's like being Darth Vader and saying, I'm your father, Luke. And then that's when it all came. But I purposely didn't I only had my scenes to learn because I didn't want the responsibility of carrying around the script, that I was completely paranoid that somebody would find it. But because I watched the show, I didn't want any spoilers. I didn't want to know what was going on. So I isolated myself in that way. Whereas in Abraham's Boys, I had, complete knowledge of the arc of this character. Um, but look, these characters are really fun to play because um, when you play, and I hate to call them villains because I don't like to stigmatize characters, even regardless of what their actions are. I think you have to, the idea you play Abraham is his trajectory, his prime directive is to rid the earth of this evil, and that which is ultimately revealed is sort of, contradicts that. But he was a marvelous character to play, and Natasha really gave me all the room that I needed to be able to just sort of find the character. And a wonderful band of actors to work with, but we didn't have the luxury of bonding and having rehearsal periods and everything. So the nature of this kind of filmmaking is run and gun. You need to get the shots, you need to get it in the can and get the day done, because your budgetary restrictions and time restrictions exist. I kind of think that lends to a kind of spontaneity with actors that makes the performance. The boys are wonderful. Brady and Judah, I think, are great, and Jocelyn and Johnny and Aurora Perrineau. I mean, it was a wonderful experience, and I'm excited for the film to come out for people to see it, because I think it's interesting. I'm a huge horror fan, but my take when I read the script is I went, oh, this isn't really a horror film at all. This is really a story about a family, and it's very character driven, um, and it's really a thinking person's. Which is not to deny or diminish horror, because I will sit. I'm. I mean, for hours. I'll watch good, bad, and indifferent horror. I don't really care. I want to experience it all. But I think this film leans much more into an art film, and into really character driven storytelling, rather than relying on, whoop, that's scary. Oh my God, that's too much blood. I don't want to see that.
Yeah, definitely. It's such a fascinating film. And I mean, I could talk to you for hours, but unfortunately our time is done. So I say thank you for your time and best of luck with Abraham's Boys.
Cheers. It was wonderful speaking with you. Have a grand day.
Thank you.